Hello and welcome to episode 71 of the Crash and Ride podcast. I'm Patrick Ferguson. I'm your host. This week's episode is the second half of my interview with Conan Neutron. Conan is the singer-songwriter and guitar player in the band Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. He was formerly in Victory and Associates and also in the band Mount Vicious. And before that, he was in the amazing band Replicator. He's also the host of the podcast Protonic Reversal. I was on that podcast last week. We had a really good time. It's really good talk. I had planned to get the second half of this interview out a lot sooner, but this week was just crazy. Every time I turned around, there was some more wild shit happening in the news. And, I've still got to homeschool my kid and fix all the meals around here. But I just kept turning around and looking at my phone and is America like a guest star on the last 3 episodes of Lost now? What is happening? As I'm recording this, it is the evening of October 3rd, 2020. By my watch, we are 203 days into the COVID-19 quarantine. The President of the United States of America has been at Walter Reed Medical Center for a little over 24 hours, having come down with a virus that has affected a huge chunk of the global population. If you're listening to this at some time in the future, I cannot begin to communicate to you how weird this year has been. And it just keeps getting weirder. And it would be funny if there weren't so many people in desperate straits because they don't have any money. As I've said at the beginning of the show a lot lately, my wife and I are doing okay. I mean, we're not way ahead by any stretch of the imagination. We're doing a lot better than most folks. And so we're finding small ways that we can help out in our community. I know that mutual aid pages are popping up on Facebook in a lot of communities. Mutual aid is a fundamentally peer-based concept. You're not handing a whole giant check to some ideologically based charity that's going to then turn around and deny it to someone because they're trans or gay or maybe have a drug problem or homeless. This is a way that you can give straight to people in your community. So if there's a mutual aid page in your community, join it. And if you've got $5 or $10, man, it means the world to people who don't have anything. Oh man, I should have said this already. If this is your first episode of Crash and Ride is a long-form interview podcast where I talk to musicians who've survived anxiety, depression, addiction, and trauma. The idea was that if we could have open and honest conversations with each other, we could start to recognize our sadness and the sadness of others and find some common ground and start to get better. I'm a professional touring musician who's been sidelined by COVID-19. Before this, I was doing, 100, 200 dates a year, and I'm ready to get back to that, as I'm sure most of you are. But in the meantime, I'm having these phone conversations with other musicians, and we're trying to work it out. Okay, I got a couple of quick announcements. Crash and Ride is brought to you in part by Greer Amplification. Greer Amps builds the best boutique effects pedals available. If you're looking for an overdrive, boost, fuzz compressor, or tremolo that is rugged, road-tested, and at home, on stage, in the studio, or in your living room, Greer has a pedal for you. Nick and his staff strive to build the best products around with the best tone you've ever heard. They believe in their products, and they stand behind them too, backing each one up with a lifetime warranty to the original owner. Each Greer Amps product is hand-built in Athens, Georgia, USA. Go to www.greeramps.com or visit your favorite music retailer today. Crash and Ride is also brought to you in part by Jittery Joe's, a local coffee roaster based here in Athens, Georgia. They have a special espresso blend named after the podcast. You can get Crash and Ride espresso, whole bean or ground, in cans from our website at crashandridepodcast.com. Or, in COVID times, I would just as soon you get that coffee from my friend Seth Hendershot at Hendershot's Coffee. Hendershot's is an outstanding local coffee house here in Athens, Georgia that is also a live music venue. They've gone down to some fraction of their normal capacity so that they can serve coffee on their patio. They don't have live music right now. And Seth, ever resourceful guy, he's a great musician, he's a great dad, he's a really great guy. He's selling merchandise off his website, including Crash and Ride Espresso. You can go to hendershotsathens.com and find out more. HenderShotsAthens.com. You can get Crash and Ride Espresso there. You can get the Widespread Panic Jittery Joe's blend there. Widespread Panic is, of course, the famous jam band from here in Athens, Georgia. You can get the Kishibashi blend there. Kishibashi is the great indie rock band from here in Athens, Georgia. They have great t-shirts, great hats. They have stickers. You can get all that with Hendershot's logo on it. And in doing so, you help support the Athens music scene because it helps keep a great live music venue and coffee house open, and it also keeps a whole mess of musicians on the payroll. The people who work for Seth at Hendershots are musicians and painters and poets and actors and all kinds of creative souls who, they have a day job at a coffee shop. It's part of doing what we do. So by buying coffee from Seth right now, you help him continue to meet payroll and keep those people around. So HenderShotsAthens.com. HenderShotsAthens.com. Support live music in Athens. Support live musicians in Athens. And do your part to protect the Athens music scene. Before we jump into part 2 of this interview, I want to talk about something else real quick. I know a lot of folks are really struggling right now. There's folks I know who have been isolated alone in their apartments for a very long time. There are other people who have had relationships that have fallen apart under the pressure of economic precarity and just the long extended period of uncertainty. And I know people who are just absolutely going under because they don't have any income right now. If you're in a really dark place and you're struggling, I'd encourage you to call the National Alliance on Mental Illnesses helpline at 1-800-950-NAMI. That's 1-800-950-6264 between the hours of 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern Time. That's a suicide prevention and mental health resources information line. If you have to call sometime outside of those hours, if it's not between 10 and 6 Eastern Time, there's also the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That's 24/7. That's 1-800-273-8255, 1-800-273-TALK, T-A-L-K. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 24/7. It's free. It's anonymous. They have paid volunteers to help you through your crisis. Call 1-800-273-8255, 1-800-273-TALK. There's more mental health resource information coming up later in the show. At the halfway point, there's a quick announcement that talks about Backline, which I would encourage you to check into if you're a working musician. I also talk about the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline some more, and I talk about Nucci Space, which is a local resource here in Athens, Georgia. If you take nothing else away from this show, I want you to take away the belief that there's always someone there to reach out to if you need help. Anxiety's biggest ally is silence. Don't sit in silence. Ask for help if you need it. All right. Part 2 of my interview with Conan Neutron. Conan, that guy, he's a talker. He'd be the first one to tell you that. We talk about so much stuff. In this episode, we talk about his musical life after the breakup of Mount Vicious and the lessons he learned from that. And also, we talk about the formation of Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends and how fruitful that's been. We talk about who my favorite rock guitar player I think going is right now. You might be surprised, but if you've ever heard her play, you will not be surprised. I do have a couple of minor corrections I need to make on me just shooting from the hip and being just wrong about two things. One, I refer to Lauren K. Newman as Lorraine K. Newman. I don't know what kind of brain cramp I had at that moment, but it's of course Lauren K. Newman of the band Palo Verde and later of the band Painted Debris and also of Lonesome Traveler and with Conan Neutron, Household Gods. And also later, late in this episode, I misattribute a quote to Charles Bukowski. I refer to dying of addiction as suicide on the installment plan. That is actually the title of a book by French author Louis Ferdinand Céline. The book is Mort à crédit, which means death on credit, which was translated into English as death on the installment plan. Aging punk rockers among my friend group take note that band name is not taken. So I think that covers just about everything I said wrong in this episode. I think everything else is right, or at least stands on its own. So without any further delay, let's jump into part 2 of my interview with Conan Neutron. How did you meet Lorraine K. Newman?
Replicator. We played a... So this was before her band was called Palo Verde. It was still called Stick It In at the time.
Oh, God. That's so unfortunate.
There's an incredible story about how that changed. When they said to change that name, they got pulled over by some cops in New Mexico. Apparently they'd been something like a kidnapping or something along those lines. And that person had been driving a van that kind of looked like theirs. And so Jericho were like, no, that's not us. We're, we play in a band. They're like, oh, what's your band name? And they were like, fuck, Stick It In. And the cops are just like, oh, okay. And they were like, oh, we have to change that band name. We have to change it. So they changed it to Palo Verde. But at the time we first played with Lauren, it was in Replicator. And we played this arcade in Portland called Ground Control. And actually, Bad Brains were playing a reunion show. I don't even know it was a reunion show at that point, but they were playing a show like 2 doors down. I think it's safe to say more people went to that show than went to ours. But, I mean, just from the first hit, it was like, oh my God, who is this person?
If you've never seen Lorraine K. Newman, a tragically small number of people can actually say that they've been fortunate enough to see her play live. She was an absolute force of nature, and I don't say that lightly.
No, it's the right term to use, because just every inch of her body went into the playing. Yeah. And
so she played guitar or drums in Palo Verde?
In Palo Verde, which at the time was still called Stick It In, she played drums. Yeah. Incredible drummer, and also incredible guitar player too. Just absolutely incredible. And you know, and we just vibed, you know, and it was like one of those things where, you know, we played together a few times over the years, and just kind of, she was someone I knew from tour, right? And was like, wow. And I always would be like, God dang it, like, she is so, like, how is she not known? Like, known.
Yeah.
And it always blew my mind.
I have some thoughts about that. She was never going to allow herself to be shoved into the female musician ghetto. Like,
oh, no way. No way.
I saw at least one interview just go completely sideways when someone wasn't letting go of that. It's like, you're one of the greatest female guitar players I've ever seen. And she was like, fuck you.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? Fucking good on her for that. But if she had played the game, I think you might be honest on me with that. But it's like, her whole thing was she wanted to be the best. Mm-hmm. She wanted to play. She wanted to be the best. Well, and the thing is, she fucking was. Mm-hmm. She fucking was. But it didn't matter. And so with Household Gods, all four of us kind of had something to work past slash achieve. I don't know if I've ever talked about this, frankly, but that was Lauren's thing. Is she was the best, and it just didn't matter, you know, in the larger scope of things, right? And us doing that was an opportunity for her to show what she could do, and she slayed it and killed it. And in a situation where she deserved to be there. She always deserved to be there. And it is a personal failing on my part that it's not entirely my fault, but the fact that she didn't get to see the finished results is always going to haunt me a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I also know it's not entirely on me. And part of that's because that wasn't a Conan Neutron joint. You know, that was four people coming together. No expectations, no rules, trying to make something cool. That's all it was. Mm-hmm. Just get back to the idea of playing music in the first place. And I treated that as like, oh, I got to make sure I got to be respectful. Going back to the Mount Vicious thing, right? Like, I got to be respectful of the other humans that are here. Make sure everyone, you know, are we good? Okay, cool. And what I didn't realize is that literally everyone wanted me to kind of like take over the band dad responsibilities. Like, nobody wanted to do that piece. Yeah. And I get it. It's terrible. It sucks. And again, as I mentioned, I hate it too. Mm-hmm. But I happen to be okay at it. I didn't. So she had issues, gastrointestinal issues for a while, but it was very important for her not to be seen as a musician with a disability. That was like vital for her, to the point that she probably, there's things that she could have done that would have prolonged her life, but it didn't suit how she wanted to live her life, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I knew that going into making the record, but you know, like whatever, she's slaying it on drums, slaying it on guitar. I actually asked her to do a Secret Friends tour with us, and she agreed, and she had to back out the last minute, which I was like, oh, that's very un-Lauren. That's weird. And she told me, but she swore me to secrecy that she was having health problems. I was like, oh, okay.
She kept that really secret.
Dude, that shit was, you'd have an easier time getting NSA files and getting details about Lauren's medical life. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's because the thing is, she wanted to be known for the work, and she wanted to be known for the fact that she did what she did And it was undeniable. And all of that was true. And if I had known then what I know now, I think I would have reacted differently about certain things. But
yeah. So you didn't know that she was near death?
No, she was in the hospital for a while, and it sucks because the last exchange we had was a text message exchange, and she sent me this super long, incredibly thoughtful, incredibly beautiful message of just saying how, making that record was one of the best experiences of her life. She thought of me as like a long lost musical brother. She couldn't wait to do more stuff. Like, just is incredibly, I'm not going to get into like all the details of all of it, but just really amazing message. And it was a day before we left for another leg of tour, and I was like sending out records. So I just sent like a really, not curt, not rude necessarily, but not a very thoughtful reply. One of which was like, hey, make sure to get me the vocal tracks for those songs you're doing. Just some dumb, like, administrative housekeeping BS.
Mm-hmm.
And
so you didn't really twig that this might be her, like...
I had no idea. I had no idea. And that haunts me, man. And like I've talked to people about it, and they brought up the important point that it isn't about the last interaction you have with someone. Right? Like, people look at things like as aggregate total. And she knew that I care deeply for her as a friend and bandmate and musician, and that, it's just tough, man. There's things that, like, if you had known it was the last time you're going to talk to someone, what would you say, right? And it wouldn't be what I said, which was fine. It just was this incredibly long, thoughtful thing, and like I was like, oh yeah, great. Basically, that wasn't exactly it, but you know what I mean. Just in the ways that I am. Look, intellectually, I know that's stupid, and to not worry about stuff like that. But emotionally, like I self-flagellate about stuff like that, and I'm trying to acknowledge that and be better about it. But
she passed in. Time is all fucked up for me because of the quarantine thing, but was it December when she passed?
December. It was the day before my birthday.
Ah, fuck.
Just like kill me.
Yeah. And then just a couple of months into quarantine, Vern Rumsey passed.
Yeah.
He was bass player in that band. For people who don't know, this band that Conan sort of was David Pajo, Lorenke Newman, Vern Rumsey from Unwound, and Vern passed. What was it? June of this year?
Not even June. August.
Fuck! It just happened.
Yeah, it's not. It's at the time of this recording. I think it's almost exactly a month. Yeah, that's it. So that's a slightly. That's a slightly different story. Vern, first of all, incredible human being, and just the coolest dude. And like, you got to understand, man, Unwound is one of my favorite bands of all time. It's one of the reasons I play music. And I went from like the dorky kid, coming up to this impossibly cool, amazing bass player who just smoked constantly and like in defiance of gravity, like pulled off shit that even like Keith Richards couldn't pull off. Like, just like, how is he smoking? Like, I don't understand how he can do that when he plays the way that he plays, but just the coolest dude too. And you talk to him, like, he's the one that, like I mentioned at the memorial, he's one of the first people that kind of taught me that, like, look, no matter how much of a badass you are, or how big your band is, or whatever, it's like we're all in this together. We're all just taking turns being on stage. We're all just people. Don't take it too seriously. And that really, I took that to heart. We established a really strong, long-lasting friendship. He recorded the last Replicator record too, and we'd always stay at his place on tour. You know what I mean? That was always a blast. Mm-hmm. But I mean, let's not let him off that easy. Like, he was an alcoholic, like a bad one.
Yeah.
And that's fairly well documented. I don't think that's going to be like breaking news for anyone. But he was an alcoholic, and all that comes with that, including the fact that he was hospitalized and literally told, if you don't stop drinking, you will die. And to his credit, he did. He went into rehab and came back out, and that's when we did the Palace Intrigue, because we did the Household Gods record, and he was killing it. It was something where, for Vern, what he was trying to overcome was this idea that, like, people thinking that he peaked 20 years ago, right? That, like, he didn't have it anymore, that it was like forgotten thunder. And he wasn't super in his head about it, but it kind of bummed him out sometimes that, like, people loved Unwound. Unwound was such a huge big deal to people, but didn't really pay any attention to anything that he did in the past 18 years. Right? Yeah. Like, because he was still writing songs. He was, touring with his band, putting out records, and it didn't connect with people in the same way. But he was still loved for this thing that was like a fixed moment in time. He's like, God, that was so long ago, Yeah. But he brought it too. He brought it hard, and he, I don't know if he particularly had anything to prove to himself necessarily, but he proved it. He proved that he was one of the greats. And I mean, fuck, the reversal of, like, being, like, just, the freaking 19-year-old kid in awe of somebody playing in a band, and then, like, I'm playing music with this person. We're making a record currently, and everybody is shitting their pants equally because nobody really knows what's going to happen.
Right.
We're on a completely equal territory of pants shitting right now. Mm-hmm. Because there were no songs ahead of time. We all just came up with stuff there. Usually, like, the day before, the night before, desperately and quickly writing at the kitchen table. And so because of that, it doesn't really sound like anything any of the rest of us have done. It kind of sounds a little bit like all of it and a little bit like none of it. And it was one of the most kind of cool and weird recording experiences ever because of that. But Vern was like, even after Lauren passed, I would get these calls from Vern, and he's a talker. He was someone, and he was not in a bad way. No, I can't wait to get off the phone. Like, just like, he's a talker.
Yeah.
I'm a talker too. I'm not much of a phone talker normally, but he was doing well. He was, like, working in the garden. He was keeping sober. Like, it was, but quarantine's tough, man. And it's especially tough if you're an addict, and that doesn't go away. But he was, like, really excited about, like, oh man, we gotta do another Household Gods record. Like, we'll find a way to, like, honor Lauren. But, like, imagine if we, it's what he always said, is like, imagine if we had time to write songs first. I'm like, oh, it's a good point.
Where did you guys record that record?
Rancho de la Luna in Joshua Tree.
Okay.
Which that's David Ketching's place. Mm-hmm. Desert Sessions. That really great last Iggy Pop record, Post Pop Depression, was done there. Like, just like, I mean, a house, basically, a house in the desert that does everything wrong, recording wise. Like, there's nothing about that studio that makes sense or follows traditional studio logic. Mm-hmm. But it sounds amazing, and it's just like, there's just cool guitars everywhere and, like, weird little noise making stuff, and it's just, Dave's like, yeah, just grab whatever, and so we kind of, like, took that into the vibe of, Pajo grabs, like, this 12-string. I'm gonna play this one on this song. Okay, great. It sounds like it's got a chorus pedal on. That's really interesting. Hey, what should we put on here? Oh, I don't know. Why don't we use this pedal, and, like, I'll mess with the knobs while you play. Just getting into the idea of what does it mean to make music.
Yeah.
And for David, it was like he'd had that motorcycle accident.
Right.
And that like, talk about a guy that, like, so amazing, but, like, has had a rough go of it in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And he didn't say this when he was on your show, but I'm going to say it. I was talking to him about it. And I was like, oh, what'd your physical therapist say afterwards? He's like, oh, he just told me to walk it off. And I'm like, was he a 50s gym teacher? Like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, walk it off. walk it off. Are you like it just blew my mind. Like I was mad for him. I'm like, that's not appropriate. Like,
No.
But for him, he hadn't really, he hadn't really been playing since that accident. And he was kind of his head about stuff.
Yeah.
And for me, I was really in my head about stuff. And one of the reasons why is because of the time, the new Secret Friends record, Dark Passengers, I recorded that like very soon, I think like a couple days after that. Like that's why I was in Southern California. And it's a concept record about mental health and depression.
Yeah.
And I am manic depressive, which that also surprises people. And I'm like, I don't know why that surprises you, because what you're doing is you're seeing the manic parts. Like, and that's not, I don't expose myself when it's the depressive parts because I wouldn't put people through that. And that's what I do.
Yeah.
And I'm a high functioning manic depressive. But I had this idea of like, getting back to the idea of what this band can accomplish and what the songwriting can accomplish, of like, well, okay, so kind of sort of did a record about my dead friend that inspired me to do all this stuff, who was a mixed result. Mm-hmm. Made a cool record about one of the most famous cannibals in fiction and like the world around him, and that did the thing it was supposed to do. Did these singles, et cetera, et cetera. But I started thinking, like, nobody knows how long they have on this planet. And I was like, well, what if I just tried bringing some of this stuff that I feel literally on a daily basis out into the light? And what would that sound like? It doesn't have to necessarily, like, I love them, but it doesn't have to sound like Black Heart Procession. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to sound like what's being articulated. Mm-hmm. But what, could I do that? Would it be any good? I don't know. And again, this is where I have crippling imposter complex as well. And it was actually while writing the song about imposter complex, I was having imposter complex about writing the song about imposter complex. And I started doing the thing where when you're a dick to yourself, where you're like, who the fuck do you think you are to be doing this?
Yeah.
Who the fuck do you think you are? You talentless asshole.
That's a bad spiral to get into.
And that was like a multi-month spiral.
Yeah. How long were you in Joshua Tree? Like how long?
I think we did the record in like 5 days, maybe 6. I mean, the entire idea was so for me. I mentioned everybody had their thing they were trying to overcome. Right. My thing was I was in like a deep spiral about like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make this record. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to make a record. What is a record? That level of being inside your head, like super, spiraling basically. Of like, okay, so I've written this record, and we're gonna do it, but is it gonna be any good? Am I gonna be able to do it? Just beating myself up over it, and of the many amazing things that I owe David and Vern and Lauren and Dave Ketching and John Russo, like making that record was just like, oh, it's cool, man. It's music. Like it just, it made me realize how much the stuff that you obsess about, the stuff that you think about, that you get into this repeated grind about with yourself, none of that matters, man. You're just making music, and you're just trying to do something cool, and that reset me in a way that frankly made for a much better record for us as well. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I needed that myself, because again, this is about a year-long exploration of me just being like in my head about my mental health.
Yeah. Was there ever any indication in your sort of late night conversations with Vern that he had sort of fallen into the pit again?
Yeah, no, valid question. Yeah. There there was. And then when I immediately called him on it, he's like, "Oh, I just had, I had a beer or two." I mean, it's the alcoholic thing, right? Oh, no, it's just having a couple beers. I'm like, yeah, but you can't do that. Like, that's not a thing you can do.
Yeah.
Like, you understand you don't have that option. And me being the sort of hardcore realist about that, because, my mom's an alcoholic and a drug addict. Her father was an alcoholic. I had the gene. I didn't drink for literal years. And one of the reasons why is like, what if I have the gene, man?
Mm-hmm.
So I know what alcoholism looks like. I know what addiction looks like. And, he was doing all the things, but like, what can you do from like, I live in Milwaukee. He lives in Olympia. Well, not technically Olympia, but, so I did as much as you can be from a concerned friend from far away, but quarantine wasn't good for Vern. It's not good for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But he started off being, like, oh, whatever, a couple of beers, and like,
yeah. No,
when you're told that if you don't stop drinking, you will die, those problems don't go away. They continue to be health problems that continue to be true, and you can't save them. You can't save everyone as much as you might want to. And that's something I have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a part of me that says, well, you weren't good enough to save him. You didn't say the right thing. You didn't whatever. And that's BS.
Yeah, that's just trying to push a river, when you're dealing with someone.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
someone else's darkness,
Like, what are you going to do? Like, show up with like a magic staff and like turn the beer into a seltzer water? No, man. Like, what the fuck? Like, like I got so infuriated with some people on the internet posting about how it was a suicide. I was like, really? I'm curious why you would say that. But of course, I think I was talking to you. Whereas it's like, well, it's no more suicide than like any alcoholic is. It's the Bukowski thing. It's it's the slowest suicide. Suicide in slow motion.
Suicide on the installment plan.
That's what it is. Yeah. Sorry, I'd say it's.
Yeah.
But it fucks with me, man, and I'm sick. I'm sick of good people going, and I know that's not like a common, oh wow, what a breaking news, but there's been a lot, and I think we're going to see this era of humanity with COVID. I think we're going to see that there's a huge psychic cost with it, that we lose a lot of people, and not just directly because of COVID, but because of depression, because of addiction, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we're going to, again, I'm of the misplaced optimism of the doom to think that we're going to get through it. There's going to be an afterwards. But people are going to look back at this era and be able to think, oh, yes, that's, when these things happened. And, there was this unrecognized malaise that led to like a jump of like this percentage in suicide and, whatever.
Yeah.
And I realized that by a sheer statistics game, right, there's going to be people you care about that are in that. And it makes me so uncontrollably angry that it has to, like, for some people to take this seriously, it has to literally happen to someone in their family. Like, that makes me just inoperable with rage. But I mean,
we're definitely at a moment where we're realizing that there is just a culture in the United States of weaponized selfishness, and we're just gonna have to like live through it and figure some way.
I think we will live through it too. That's the thing. I'm firmly of the belief that we will get on the other side of this. Now, what that looks like, I got no idea. Hopefully it doesn't look like The Road or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like,
talk to me a little bit about what your sort of regular practice to modulate your manic depression is. Do you do meds at all?
I don't.
Have you ever?
Very briefly when I was a lot younger. And I didn't like what it did to me. It So it made it easier to deal with, but it made everything real. There's actually a song about this too, but it's the one Lindsay sings from Cell Phones. It's called "Without the Poison, What Am I?" But it changed me in a way that I didn't like, and what I was getting out of it versus what it was taking away from me wasn't enough. So I decided, okay, I'm going to find other ways to deal with it. So I used to be really good about meditating. I'm freaking terrible at it now. I read a lot about psychology and things along those lines. And that's where I oftentimes talk about like intellectually knowing something, but then like emotionally feeling it. That's kind of what I'm self-analyzing, I guess, is the best way to put it. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to lie, man. There's been times that I've medicated with alcohol. Like, I'm not a hard alcohol guy at all, but I like fancy beer, like good beer, right? Mm-hmm. And I've definitely been guilty of just, all right, fuck it, let's go nuts. You know, and just wanting to obliterate myself for a while, wanting to like impair myself specifically because the pain of knowing things and the pain of being is so much that it's a short-term solution. But knowing also intellectually is a short-term solution. It's completely unhealthy.
Yeah.
So should I be medicated? Yeah, probably. Am I? No. It
seems like, and
medications come a long way too in recent years, and it's something I probably should readdress. I saw a therapist for many, many years in Oakland. I have not found someone in Milwaukee. I found like a unicorn in the fact that like he was a dude that like played guitar, like he used to play in a band. I was like, oh my God, you're gonna get it. Mm-hmm. Like when I talk to you about like the crazy stuff in my head, like you're gonna be able to understand like what it means when I talk about band stuff and how it isn't just like some flippant thing that doesn't matter. Like I was like, oh, so great. And it was like, wow, I'm never going to have this again. It's like what I thought of when we moved away. And to be honest, I put no effort into it whatsoever. And that's on me. Yeah. So I don't know. That's like the worst possible answer I think you could ever give. And it's depressing in and of itself. But
what's your cycle like? You talked about like you have ups and downs. How like are we talking about like over a period of months or weeks or hours? Like
both. I've been very much in a down cycle for the past 6 weeks, something along those lines. Mm-hmm. My downs are better than a lot of other downs, but it's interesting when I say better because it just means more productive. You know, like I can get out of bed. I can do the things that need to be done. But then I'm also like, it wouldn't be so bad if I just disappeared. That wouldn't be bad. That'd probably be easier for everyone. No, it wouldn't. Yeah, you're right. But it wouldn't be so bad if I just was gone. You know, just like act like in that kind of, there's a specific term for that type of suicidal thought. And I can't remember what it is right now. But I have that a lot.
Do you mean intrusive thoughts?
Yeah, just like not like I am going to take these pills and go into the bathtub or walk into traffic or whatever along those lines, but just have that. If I stopped existing right now, that would be fine. Like that would probably be better for everybody. Like those kinds of thoughts. And I'm aware enough to be like, that's, crazy. Like I'm having these crazy internal dialogues, right? Like I have these like warring factions. Like think about it in terms of like the cartoon with like the angel and the devil on the bull shoulders. Mm-hmm. It's a very spirited debate, like Sartre and Kierkegaard style, like global ennui, things along those lines, but it's happening constantly. Mm-hmm. But while that's going on, I can say, I am in a low period right now. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to not put pressure on myself to do, these things that will stress me out and make me worse now. And I'm going to get on the rowing machine, or I'm going to write some things down or something along those lines. Like find some things that help me get past it's wrong, but kind of work through it, maybe is the best way to put it.
Is exercise a big part of your sort of coping with these intrusive thoughts? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, like I do hate lifting almost every morning. Like watch the news and lift weights.
Yeah.
That's like it's very necessary. So I suppose in a way that's a type of medication too, right? That, like putting in exercise, and with increasingly diminished gains as I've gotten older, I might add. But that's also getting older.
Yeah.
But it's and the thing is sort of like, okay, well if I'm doing an hour on the rowing machine or like lifting weights for so long, then I'm not going to feel compelled to like, cool, let's just drink a 6-pack and watch Predator.
Yeah. Again.
And again, it sucks because I know, and it's almost like I wish that sometimes I didn't, because then they're like, oh, I don't know why this is happening. No, I know why it's happening. I've got a broken brain. That's why. And it's broken in very specific ways. And what I don't want to do, and things that I've done in the past, is I've manifested that these dark thoughts and resting states of misery or whatnot, and externalize them towards other people.
Yeah.
And the short way of saying is I've been a cock. Like I've been like, lashed out at people and been not cool.
Yeah. Hey, Crash and Ride would like to let you know about a new industry-wide initiative focused on mental health called Backline. Backline is a hub for artists, industry professionals, and their families to quickly and easily access mental health and wellness resources. Backline is partnered with leading support organizations and care providers to streamline access to services specifically geared towards the music industry. Go to www.backline.care to get the support that you need to thrive both on and off the road. The way that Backline works is you contact them via their website or their 800 number, and they will connect you with a caseworker. That caseworker will be familiar with resources in your area to get you the mental health care that you need. If you need to talk to a therapist, they can put you in touch with a therapist. If you need to talk to a psychiatrist and be evaluated for meds, they have a list of psychiatrists. They have resources for inpatient therapy. They can put you in touch with sober companions. If you need someone to travel with you while you're on the road and help you stay out of trouble, Backline is a really end-to-end comprehensive solution for people who are struggling in the music industry. Now, a little closer to home, if you're in the Athens, Georgia area and you're a musician struggling with anxiety and depression, you can contact Nucci Space at 706-227-1515 or go to nuci.org. That's nucci.org. Nucci Space is a nonprofit musicians resource focused on suicide prevention. Here's how Nucci's works. If you contact them and you say, hey, look, I'm in crisis, whether you're a musician or not, they'll connect you with resources in the Athens, Georgia area. If you're a musician, that health care will be subsidized. In my own case, I was able to see a counselor for $15 or $20 a session. If you're not a musician, they'll do their best to connect you with low-cost or sliding scale options for mental health care in Athens. Nucci Space provides a lot of resources for musicians in the Athens area. They have low-cost practice spaces. They have a gear sale where they're constantly selling secondhand gear. They've got a low-cost recording studio. They're really just an amazing asset to the Athens, Georgia music scene, but their primary mission is helping people who are depressed or anxious get better. Go to nuci.org, that's nucci.org, or call 706-227-1515. And finally, no matter where you are, if you're struggling with anxiety and depression and you're contemplating self-harm, you can always call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-TALK. It's 24/7. It's free. It's confidential. They have trained volunteers to help get you through your crisis and get you the help that you need. Call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 or go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Man, I want to jump into these questions. I know you're familiar with them because you've heard a couple of episodes. But
I've heard a lot. I've actually, as someone who I don't listen to a ton of podcasts, weirdly, because I'm usually too busy doing my own stuff. I've listened to a lot of your episodes. I think your show's very good, and I think it's
Thanks, man.
I think it's important for me to say that, because if just having you on my show, there's a few people that checked out your show, and I was like, good. That's what I wanted to have happen.
Yeah, well,
that's the system working.
Right, and vice versa. Like, I hope that we could drive some traffic to Protonic Reversal, because I think that like there's still people out there who aren't aware of bands like Unwound or B. Hamilton, or any of the bands that we love that sort of work in that noisy, jagged genre, and like there's some real humanity there.
It's been really amazing. We talked about this earlier about like people that didn't have time for podcasts or whatever, and that like, oh, got all the time in the world now, but like finding, like hearing from people that like, oh, these episodes, like putting them out and out into the void, which is what all podcasting feels like.
Yeah,
it's not just an anchor for me. It's an anchor for other people. Like people have like just, I mean, some of it like I wouldn't even feel comfortable disclosing openly, but like have just talked about how it's been a nice thing for them. Something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Which there's so precious little of that in this world.
There's a couple of people who I really care about a lot who will occasionally, like, I'll crack a joke in an interview and then like I'll put it out and forget about it, and then I'll get a text like, some point after the episode's released of like that'll allude to the joke, and I'm like, oh right, I'm a part of other people's lives, and it's kind of remarkable.
And you'd be like, that sounds familiar. Who said that? They're like, you motherfucker, right. You said that. I'm like, oh yeah, in that way. Mm-hmm. I look forward to a new Crash and Ride when it comes out. It's not a show I binge because I find it deeply affecting.
It's kind of tough.
You know what I mean?
You can only like listen to so many people's firsthand narrative of their suicide attempt in a row before you're like, I think I need to let it down. Yeah.
Like I'm gonna watch some episodes of The League or something. I think right now, let's take it down a notch.
Yeah.
But I do listen. I think it's for like the 1,000th time on this show. I think you're doing good work, and it's a.
Thanks, man. It means a lot.
I'm glad it's there. I'm glad you're doing it.
All right, let's crush these questions. You ready?
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. What's your fondest memory of a meal that you've had?
So I'm not someone that has deep connection with food necessarily. And which meaning that like, I don't often have, some people say like, oh, when I had this pesto, it transported me to, being in this place, et cetera, et cetera. That's not really me, but I thought about this, and there's a very key moment in my personal history and the history of Replicator. It was our first U.S. tour, the first meaning like off the West Coast. Coast to Coast tour, and we played in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at the launch pad, and it was a good show. And it was a huge place, by the way, way too big for that show, but we made a little money, and we, us kids, well, not kids, but younger dudes, were like, let's treat ourselves and have a meal at Denny's on the band. And it's not that the food itself was remarkable. It was Denny's. It was fine. Like whatever.
Yeah,
like
Denny's is fine.
it's fine. It's neither extraordinary it's not terrible either. It's fine. But we sat and ate this Denny's food in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we didn't even talk that much. It was just sort of, we had this moment of like, wow, we did, like, this is due to us playing music. This is us due to us, having our like crazy paranoid noise rock songs, there's ridiculous things that we do that nobody understands. We made enough money on this to be able to buy ourselves this food and like have a hotel room tonight. And it was the first time that ever happened. And it was remarkably profound. And something that, like, I mean, I just mentioned I don't normally have like close association with events and food. I can remember it as if it happened yesterday.
I have a friend who's an actor. He's a friend of my wife, of course, is a former professional actor, now theater professor. And she has another friend who's a professional actor. and he does this hilarious character that just pops up from time to time. And anyone less talented, it might be annoying, but it's always like it's a way for him to give a voice to a part of his character that he knows it's like an impulse to say a thing that jives with his upbringing in rural Arkansas, that he knows better, but sometimes he has to say things, and he has this character named Lamar. I think it's Lamar. And Lamar was helping my wife move before I moved to Chicago. And sorry, this friend of mine whose character has the character named Lamar, they're moving my wife into her new apartment on the 5th floor of a building in Chicago, and there's no elevator. And it's like they moved this twin bed that she has, and like a pillow, some blankets, a coffee cup, a fridge press, and then 1 box of books, 2 box of books, 3 like books, like
yeah.
Like
those in records are the things that when you're moving, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, but like, so she's not really like, her musical taste tends to skew towards albums with the original Broadway cast written on the cover, and so we don't really.
And you don't need to say anything else. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
We don't really have much common ground there, but so she didn't have a ton of records, but she had a whole shitload of books, and so our friend Sean, who's helping her move, like brings the last box of books up the stairs, and it's like literally 30 boxes of books, and like the ratio of books to everything else is insane, and the character Lamar sort of springs out of me and says, "Why you got so many books? These books ain't gonna put no food on your table." And in this big country dude voice.
Yeah.
And what's funny is the story that you just told me is interesting, because rock and roll, your guitar, put fucking food on your table.
Yeah, man. It's like I said, it was very profound in a way that I didn't even necessarily understand at the time.
Do you remember what you had?
I think I had it was like a chicken sandwich of some kind. I don't remember the exact thing. It might have been chicken cordon bleu, if I remember correctly. It's either that or something with bacon, one of the two. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was it was Denny's, so it was fine, as we established. But
yeah.
It tasted a little better because of how it got there.
Yeah, no, that's true. So, as you're probably aware, the next question, which has historically been, what's the most frightened you've ever been? If you're not comfortable answering that question, with a microphone in front of your face, you can always enter the question, what is the time you were braver than you ever thought you could be?
Yeah, this is tough, and it's not necessarily because, I mean, as you've also acknowledged, as a fellow white dude, we're the positions of things we have is generally speaking not going to be the same as like I am a woman out in the world, just dealing with like existing.
Yeah.
So that said, I was thinking back to we talked about earlier that first apartment. This wasn't actually the first apartment, and this wasn't the West Oakland place. This was another apartment that we were in, but it was another, like many people live in their situation. One of the roommates' boyfriend, who she was attempting to break it off with, showed up when she wasn't there with a gun, a loaded gun. And he was drunk, and he was looking to have words about why he was no longer her boyfriend and how that was going to change. And I just lucked out in being the one that was home. So I've got this guy I was like, whoa, man, like, hey, like what's going on here? And he made a special point of showing that it was loaded and that the safety was off. I was like, okay. These are the rules of engagement here. And again, as I mentioned, he was drunk and had a full thing of whiskey as well. And so I was like, well, she's not going to be home for a bit. Let's talk about this. No plan. No, what do they call it? The training where they talk people down from the ledges.
Hostage negotiation.
Hostage. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, senior moment. But I was like, because in my mind, I'm like, holy crap, he's going to try to, he's going to do something rash. Like, and this could end up with somebody dead, and probably her. And I'm going to not say her name, so try to be careful. And I was like, hey, it sounds like you've had a tough week. Why don't you tell me about it? And he's like, why don't I just shoot you? And then, of course, I go like, I assume I go like white as a sheet, right? Because he's got a loaded gun. And he's saying that, and he's like, haha, just messing with you. I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, great.
I'm gonna need to change pants now. But so he's like, hey, I'll tell you about it if you drink this whiskey with me. And I think I mentioned earlier when I talked about drinking my feelings that I'm a beer guy. Right. I don't drink much hard alcohol. Mm-hmm. At the time, I didn't drink any hard alcohol because the way I'd be able to reconcile it in my mind was like, well, beer's just beer, hard alcohol is a different thing. Luckily, I don't like it, but I probably better not to go down that road anyway. But I'm like, all right, this motherfucker's got a gun, so all right, I'm gonna drink this whiskey with you. Why don't you tell me about it? Tell me about your week. Tell me about how you came to be in this position. And I'm so scared, and I'm not just. But the thing is, I'm not just scared for me. I'm scared about like what is he going to do when she walks in the door? What's going to happen? Is this going to be like? Are we going to end up on the news because this jilted boyfriend kills my friend, my roommate? And I'm just talking to the guy and honestly mostly listening. And it's this weird circular logic. It's, I call it drunk dad logic. Even though dad didn't do that much, do as much drinking, but it's drunk dad logic. Mm-hmm. And I'm just listening to the dude all the time, eyeing these, safetyless loaded gun that he has, and just talking to him. And then occasionally, having to take some whiskey so he still feels, like it's amazing that someone would feel the need to like, we got to keep the party going. Oh yeah, the party where you're holding me at hostage with a gun? Is that the party? Yeah. We're gonna keep the party going, huh? Okay. And but I'm kind of talking through it. And at some point he puts the gun down. He like sets it down to like talk about, so he needs to use his hands to tell the story, in the great Italian tradition. I was associated that with Italian folks. And as he does that and he's telling his story, door opens and my roommate, my friend, walks in the room. He turns around to, drunk, to see her, and I fucking grab the gun. And I don't have any plan. You know what I mean? I'm just, and I, having seen many heist movies and many, independent films and things along those lines, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to, he's fully consumed with the fact that she walked in the room. I dash away, run into my bedroom and just like toss it in the back. I put the safety on first. I know enough to do that. Right. But the gun's out of the picture.
How much whiskey have you had at this point?
Enough. Yeah. And that's another thing. I was like, okay, I'm not going to try to like pull this gun on this dude because like I could not possibly be. And to be clear, this entire time I'm not like I'm going to be Jason Statham or whatever the fuck. Like I was like holy shit, how can somebody not die right now? It's like all I'm thinking about. And I'm whiskey drunk with this fucking guy. And so then I get rid of the gun, but then I'm like, he still outweighs her by like a good portion. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, oh fuck, I gotta make sure she's all right. And I walk back into the room after tossing the gun in the back, and she's like cattle driving him out the door. Cattle driving him out the door with an umbrella that's like nearby, and like just effortlessly just like dealing with him in a way that, like, unfortunately I have to say comes with people that know how to deal with violent alcoholics.
Yeah.
And this guy, it's impossible to overstate how wasted this dude is.
Yeah. Well, at some point he thought it was a good idea to come to someone's apartment with a gun.
With a fucking gun. Yeah. Front loaded.
Right.
Literally. And like, that was his starting position. Right. He started that way.
Yeah.
So he's blackout drunk. She kicks him out. We call the cops. Cops come and pick him up. I get to have the. By the way, there's a loaded gun in the backyard right now that he brought with him. Which is a weird thing to say, and even more so when you are unexpectedly drunk off of the whiskey that the home invader had.
Right, you're all sloppy, like somewhere back there. It's fucking done. Yeah,
and they're like this guy. I'm like, I'm not kidding. There's actually a gun. He brought it. It's loaded, and all throughout this whole thing, I'm just like I don't even understand like what's happening right now. But basically, this is like. She was done with this dude who was a piece of shit, and he didn't want it to be the case. And I think about that, like when I see domestic violence stuff, stuff like along those lines, or hear about it, like there's something amazingly rotten about our culture that you could be like, no, I'm going to make her take me back by bringing this gun to her house.
Yeah.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Incredibly bad plan. Yeah.
Yeah. How exactly did you feel that this was going to work out? Because one of the ways is somebody ends up dead or maimed or whatever. But like, yeah. Anyway, he ended up going to jail, and that's a whole separate story. But I was the entire time I was just in a resting state of near panic.
Yeah. And
through blind luck and just the idea of like, this guy probably needs someone to listen. This guy probably needs someone to listen to.
Yeah.
This guy probably needs to be listened to right now, and that's probably the safest thing I can do.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever told that story, frankly. Like, I mean, honestly, like I that happened. I was fucking 19 years old.
It's crazy the collision of kind of living desperately because you don't really have any other way to live when you're 19 if you're not riding on parental money,
Yeah, right.
And the amount of substances we all consumed and the people we were around, it's amazing that more of us didn't see guns.
Exactly. Like it should not have been that rare.
All right. Of all the things in your life that you've lost, what is the thing that you regret losing the most?
So I'm going to go not physical with this, but I'm just going to say that for a long time, I lost the joy of getting in a room and playing music. And that's something that I understand why I had kind of rewired my brain to associate it with negative things. And I guess that's a cheater thing to say because I got it back. But for a long time, I didn't. And I kind of felt like, oh, I guess that's just not a thing I do anymore. Like after like building my entire life around this. And I didn't realize how consequential that was for me at the time. And again, I don't know if it's cheating to say that I got it back, but it was, I hadn't realized how much I built my identity around that. If that makes sense.
No, I've been there. There was a minute where I gave it up and was fortunate enough to get it back, but man, the loss of it was horrifying.
Yeah, because it's sort of like, and I feel like the whole world is dealing with that right now, to a certain degree. Where you're like, oh, this life I had, and these things I did, those are gone now. That's not available. But like, So again, I feel like just like how I already, for my day job, work from home, I already knew how to work from home and stay on task and things along those lines. But I almost feel like I was well prepared for the pandemic in certain ways because I had already dealt with that and knew to focus like, well, what can I do? I can do the show. Okay, I'll do the show. But when that part of me was gone of like just like the joy of playing music, I was like, well, fuck, what now? Like, like why live? And then I went down that path for a long time, and like I grinded on it for a long time as well. And I bring it up because, again, that's something that people get surprised by when I talk about it. Because especially if you don't pay like super close attention, it's like, oh well, Conan's relentless. He never stops. True. Conan's always doing something. Yeah, but like again, there's things you don't see. And because I'm the way that I am, I think I don't let that in enough and don't talk about that. You know what I mean? Like it's not being a tough guy. It's just I'm sharking.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most horrifying things in my life. You're like, wow, that's the joy of playing music. Like playing music and the joy of playing music is gone now. And like there's just this gigantic void where that used to be, of which I already have a gigantic void within myself. It's a different void.
Right.
That's a multi-void complex here. Great.
So tell me about a time you received an act of kindness from a stranger.
One time on tour in Replicator, we were ripped off in Portland, and they didn't steal everything. They stole our guitars and they stole the keyboard. And luckily we were on tour with another band, the excellent Greenlight the Bombers, which Paul, the singer of that band, was the drummer for the Gary for years and years. And since we were on tour with them, we were able to borrow guitars and get through it. We had to sort of reimagine the keyboard songs a little bit on the fly.
Yeah.
But afterwards we came back and, I don't think I'm telling tales out of school to say that we weren't exactly high rolling, like working class noise rock band, right. Breaking news, doesn't make lots of money.
No.
So we played this first show we played back, which the other bands decided should be a benefit for us. I'm like, all right, fine. I borrowed a guitar. And like there was something, my instinct is to use the word emasculating, but that's wrong. That's the wrong word to use. But I just want to point out that that's my instinct to use that, to borrow someone else's guitar in that situation. But it was working on me in that way. Like it was a way that like I was like, God, I feel like I'm imposing on this person that is letting me do this. Which, of course, that was just a me thing, that nobody else felt that way. But this guy, Bill the Grill, I'm going to name him, well, not by name, but his nickname. We all call him Bill the Grill. Plays in this amazing band, Songs for Snakes, very Sugar Husker Du style. Mm-hmm. And just one of those guys is like the sweetest fucking guy. Cancer scare this year. Is currently going through chemotherapy. Seems to be getting on the other side of it, but like just a dude that like one of those guys that like, how sometimes there's people like, man, nobody has a bad thing to say about that guy. That's crazy. Like that guy's just like a unique force for good. That's mm-hmm. Bill the Grill.
Yeah.
This guy, this motherfucker walks in the door of the venue, plops down a case and opens it up in front of me, is like, hey, this is the same model of your old guitar that you got stolen, right? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, cool, that's yours now. And
no shit.
Yeah, he bought not just a guitar, but the same guitar, basically that I had before for me, apropos of nothing, and brought it to the show. And I was like, I don't even know what to say. He was like, don't say anything, just play it. And I mean, it affected me so deeply because I'm someone that, I try not to be prideful, but I feel like it's like self-sufficiency is important to me, largely because, again, having been the person that has to create these systems to move forward, It's the only way I know, right? It's hard for me to accept help, really hard.
Yeah.
Like that's something I've had to work on a lot as an adult, that like, hey man, it's okay to accept help. And I think about that a lot, like, especially because like this is, you know, years and years ago. And he was in a position where, like, you know, he wasn't like high rolling. He was making a little money, but like he wasn't exactly high rolling. It's another dude who plays in a working class rock band. And the fact he bought me a fucking guitar.
What guitar was it?
It's a Jag-Stang.
No shit.
Yeah. And that was the guitar I played that for years. I switched up to a Jagmaster in Replicator later, but yeah, I mean that guitar, you know, that went out with us like many times. I mean, I'm that's like 15th level fighter mage thoughtfulness. You know, that goes that goes above and beyond, because we had to, like, ultimately we had to cancel a whole tour because we were like, oh well, we don't have the money to do this now. And there were some big shows on that tour. Like, it was something where anything like the sliding doors philosophy or whatever of the path less traveled, like, you know, that could, some of those shows could have been very good for us, and none of them were able to happen because we had to replace all this gear.
Yeah. And
one and only time that band ever was on Pitchfork Media, by the way, was with the gear theft.
Yeah.
And you know what they did? Those motherfuckers. They didn't link to the music. They didn't link to like a review. They didn't make a review of it or anything to help us out. They linked to Master Lock. What I was like, you jerks. The only reason I bring that up is, actually, I think it's kind of funny now, but like at the time, I was not amused.
Yeah, that's a little hard to take, but well.
But Bill the Grill bought me a goddamn guitar, and the same
sweet,
guitar, and like, I've been able to pay that forward a little bit here and there in like smaller ways, but that act of kindness has always stuck with me as like, that's a way to be, you know, like his friend was in a spot, and god damn, man, buy someone a guitar. Jesus Christ. It's like buying someone a drum set or something.
Yeah. You know, I've never talked about that on this podcast. I've not brought it up.
I think that's wonderful, and we don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but I think it's fantastic.
Well, let's just say that one of the people that I love the most in the world got a drum set he didn't have to pay for, with the help of a bunch of my friends, and it was just hey, you know what'd be cool if we did this, and we fucking did it, and it was as I call it, the lightning bolt of kindness. Like, yeah, no,
absolutely, and that community is so fantastic with that. Like, it's and every once in a while I'm reminded, I'm like, oh yeah, Jesus,
yeah,
you just don't find this in life, you know. There isn't this kind of thing, and that's cool, man.
The guy who was selling, we'll sort of hint around the story. I don't want to violate the anonymity of the guy who received it, because one of the things I like least about charity is how people hold the recipient up as like an example of how, you know, I just feel like I don't ever want to be a guy on camera going, look at this act of charity I did, because I just feel like it's, once you throw yourself into the spotlight, it's disingenuous. But there was a friend of mine who's selling a drum set, a beautiful gold sparkle 73-ply Ludwig, which is, there was a time when that was just my absolute dream drum kit. You know,
it's a pretty nice drum kit, dude.
Yeah,
it's pretty fun. You could do a lot worse. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And there was a moment where I was like, oh, there it is. There was probably 6 years of my life where that was the only drum kit I wanted. I dreamed about it all the time. I tried to find a 24-inch kick drum, gold sparkle 3-ply was like, you know, it was completely unfindable, unobtainium, and you know, and then eventually I ended up with another kit with a thanks to another PRF member. I bought a set of the thermogloss Ludwigs, which are the ones with the lacquer finish that is not tinted, just gradually becomes beautiful amber honey color over time, and that's my number one kit now. It's really the only kit I want to play most of the time. And I was looking at that kit thinking, man, I'm still somewhat nostalgic about the Gold Sparkle Ludwigs because they're just the coolest fucking drums ever. But
yeah, they're pretty great.
But I don't need this kit. And, I've been sort of thinking about lightening my load some and maybe making a big geographic change. So, now I'll put a thing on my Facebook page and maybe I'll help my buddy who's selling this drum kit move it on. Cause he's got a kid too. And he's not gigging. He's a gigging drummer and I'll help him sell the kit. And somebody in the comments on my social media post about it was like, if you really want that kit, we could do a GoFundMe and buy it for you because you're doing this podcast that's helping people. It would be the least we could do.
Yeah.
And I was like, honestly, when I say I don't need this kit, I don't. I have so many perfect drum sets now because I'm an old guy and I've spent the money and I've curated the fucking perfect set of drums for me. But I have another friend that'd be really cool if we did it for him. And everybody was like, fuck yeah, let's do it. And so in 18 hours, like 50 people threw in enough money to pay this guy who was selling the kit cash to buy this drum set for someone who is another friend of mine who plays drums. And, he wasn't in a tight spot financially or anything any more than any of the rest of us. And he had never said, I really hate these drums. I wish I had some different drums, but
right.
I also
didn't do like a passive ask or anything. Like
no, but I knew that he would dig those drums, and I knew that they would make him happy. And so I was like, let's just do this, and we fucking did it. And so the guy selling the drums, he's a guy who used to play with Sheryl Crow. He lives in a very competitive musical environment in a way that most of the noise rock people and original music people haven't. Like he was playing at a level where there's just always someone waiting to cut your throat and
right
to steal your gig. And no matter how long you're out of that environment, parts of that you don't necessarily trust other drummers, or because fuckers might cut your throat. So the fact that all these strangers came together to like throw in and buy, like, do a whip around and buy somebody a drum kit was just like, no, wait a minute. How do these people all know each other? And I said, most of them don't, but they're all part of this community. He's like, is it like a cult? I'm like, no, it's not a cult.
I got a shopping bag that says not a cult, sir.
Yeah. If it was a cult, all the money would be going in one direction.
Yeah, exactly.
In this case, like, we just help each other out, and sometimes
let me cult-splain you and tell you that isn't how that works.
Right. And he was like, I'm going to throw in some cases. And he brought the price down. He just couldn't. He's still scratching his head about it, I bet, tonight. Like, never seen anything like that. Yeah.
I love that so much, and thank you for sharing that story because it's a good one, and that's a way to be, way to be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm stoked of that all went as well as it did.
We're not saying who it is, but
but he's the fucking best guy ever. Like, I will say
he's the best dude ever, and a hell of a drummer.
Yeah, but like you would say, hey, let's buy a drum set for this dude, and like 50 people would be like, hell yeah, I love that guy. Like,
yeah.
Yeah,
it wasn't pulling teeth to get this done. Let's put it that way.
Not at all. There were still people like 3 days later contacting me going, is it over? Can I give money?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, there's no, give money. Find a musician in your community and buy him a meal because no one's working. So
it's like watching a river run backwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's your favorite place to gig, Conan?
There's a club in Bellingham that is pretty amazing called the Shakedown. It's run by a friend of mine named Holly, who also is last year ran and won a seat on the Bellingham City Council. So we have a punk rocker in government, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Great player herself too. She plays in a really great band. But she runs a really great venue too. It's Bellingham's always been very important to me, as far as it was a place that was very welcoming to all my bands. Really, every band I've had has had a great time in Bellingham. This is a great rock and roll town, and it's sort of like I feel like If anyone from Olympia is listening to this, I'm sorry, but I feel like what people think Olympia is what Bellingham is. Like Olympia is kind of a drag. I'm not gonna lie. Like it's. I love the people from there. Replicator's former label, it was there, but Bellingham is cool as shit. It's a rock and roll town. It's bizarre. It's crazy. It's this little ass college town, like almost right on the Canadian border. Mm-hmm. And I just love it. It's a great place. And Holly, she plays in a band called Dryland, which is great as well. And again, also was on the city fucking council, which is fantastic. I'm cursing too much. Sorry. She came at it from the position of, I'm going to make a place knowing what it's like. Like Bellingham's a place where you move the pool table and you go play in the corner, right? It's like that type of town.
Yeah.
There's a couple kind of like above board venues, but they book, cheeseball shit, jam bands, et cetera, et cetera. And where all the action's happening is not there. What she did is she came at it from the position of someone that has played music and been involved in music, a really long time, of like, what would be a cool, like, how would I make a cool venue that would, like, this town needs? And she did it, and it's freaking awesome. And I love that place. I love being there. I love playing there. There's all these, just everything about it. Like, the sound's amazing, the stage is great, the location. She has these pictures because she's an incredible photographer too. It's like, what can't you do, Holly? Like, really? You're an incredible photographer also? But she has all these pictures from these different shows in Bellingham, like house shows and all ages shows, like art spaces and things along those lines. Just rad rock and roll photos, like up on the wall, and old flyers, like Federation X playing with, Man or Astroman, like whatever, like any of these different things. Because Estrus Records is Bellingham also.
Mm-hmm. What's the name of this club again? Tell me the name of the club again.
This is the Shakedown. The Shakedown in Bellingham, Washington. And it just occurred to me, last time we played, I was like, this is how it ought to be at every venue. Like, it's a celebration of, like, music. And it's a celebration of, it's just taking away all the nonsense. Oh, there's nowhere to change my strings. Like, all the BS that, like, when you tour, you're like, oh, Christ, why is that stairway there? Like, that's the worst possible place for that. She just came at it from a very informed place and made a really, really cool venue. And I love playing there.
Is there a restaurant with a locking door?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, there's not like a leather curtain. I think the Knitting Factory is the one I saw. Like, really? A leather curtain? Who the fuck is that for?
Yeah.
I went on actually an impassioned rant about the Knitting Factory's leather curtain to this guy, Sergio, who runs Turbo House in Montreal. Mm-hmm. Because it's the same sort of situation where he's a dude that like toured and played a lot. So like he built his venue like with all the stuff in mind, where it's like, oh god, you got locking doors in the fucking bathrooms. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Jesus Christ, man.
The things you don't think about until you're like, all right, well, I'm about 2 hours deep into that gas station meal, and troubles are brewing.
Yeah.
Again, tour, nothing but glamour.
Yeah. Fuck. All right. So, visa and income considerations aside, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live?
So here's where I out myself as I've never been to Europe. I've never been. I've traveled almost every inch of the U.S. multiple times over. Played almost every state. I've been to Hawaii, but I've never been like to Europe or anything along those lines. Like, and that's something that I feel like is that was actually going to be something that changed this year. But as it turns out, not so much. So I can't come from an informed place of, I talk to people that like, oh, Berlin is amazing. This place is amazing. And like, it sounds awesome, but I don't know. So I will say, all that said, Hawaii is a series of islands. There's multiple islands with their own culture and their own thing going on. When Lindsay and I we went to Oahu and we went to the Big Island. And the Big Island's interesting because it's the biggest landmass, but it has not that many people. And most of the population is in two different cities on either side of the island. And the Kailua Kona side is like sort of touristy, kind of like a little tourist trap kind of situation. But the Hilo side is definitely not. And I was so incredibly enchanted by Hilo, Hawaii. And just the fact that it almost kind of seems out of time, like just very much like slightly after World War II sort of mindset. And like it was Hawaii, but it was like working class Hawaii, if that makes sense. Like,
people got to live somewhere.
Yeah, and there's like no street vendors, selling overpriced hot dog on a stick or whatever the hell. And there was something about it. Just like when we were there, I was like, wow, this resonates with me. This is really cool. And like again, it's really easy to fall in love with a place when you're on vacation, right?
Yeah.
But I was really blown away by Hilo. Kalapana as well, which is further to the south and like more like villages and like lava flow and stuff like that. But it occurs to me that like that'd be a much harsher life. So Hilo, additionally, I love Missoula, Montana. I think Missoula, Montana is one of the incredibly underrated cities in the U.S. It's sort of like a cool college town. Like it's just far enough away from literally everything else that like it kind of has to make its own culture and be kind of cool. It's beautiful. It's fishing, swimming, like, if you like outdoor stuff, it's all there.
Yeah.
Again, that's another place I would never know if not for touring, but I fucking love Missoula, Montana. Missoula's amazing. I would totally punk rock retire there, which is usually what I talk about when we're talking about stuff like this.
Yeah.
And then I guess I'm answering this in 3 parts. Joshua Tree. I think Joshua Tree is amazing.
I've never been there.
It's really special, and the people that end up there are really interesting, and they're interesting in a real quiet way that like you wouldn't necessarily immediately know. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's like meth and small town problems, et cetera, but it's the landscape looks like a different planet, and there's something where like when you go there, like it makes sense where like it makes sense why so many creative people are here, because it's like you're surrounded by this beauty. And this wide open spaces that it just kind of almost forces you to think outside yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that would be very helpful for me. So Hilo, Missoula, and Joshua Tree for 3. So I don't know if that's cheating to give 3 answers, but that's what I got. But someday I'd like to go to Europe, and maybe I'll throw a European city in there if that gels, if that ever happens, which may not. Who knows?
Yeah, I hope so. All right. Do you have an ideal musical instrument, and if so, do you already own it?
I do, and I do. So I have a custom electrical guitar company guitar, and it is based on the $300 Jagmaster that I played on through most of Replicator, post Jagstang. Just this trashy beat up Squire that I just ran into the ground, like the neck was all warped. Just when you're a player that isn't exactly kind to your instruments, it's tough, man. But it was one of my it was my favorite guitar. And Kevin from Electrical Guitar Company, like I hit him up like years back, and I was like, hey man, I would love to get an electrical, but I would love to do this. Well, and this is back when he's still doing customs. Like, what do you think about doing like basically, this Jagmaster that I played in Replicator, which has like a Gibson style toggle, no tone knob. Like it was kind of specced out in a ways that my particular brand of caveman playing, it was good for me. I wouldn't accidentally hit the pickups switch selector and change it or turn myself off or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's an amazing guitar, and I'm totally into it. So I paid him over the course of like, I don't know, like a year and a half, something along those lines. Just whenever I got a little money, I like threw it towards the guitar. Yeah. And we were heading out for like a short tour out. This is Victory and Associates now. This is the second time that V&A played Thunder Snow, and we did like a set of dates around it because at the time playing Midwest was a novelty. And he was like, "Hey man, when you guys head out for Thunder Snow?" And I'm like, "Oh, this date." He's like, "Okay, cool. Like you'll have it, whatever the day before that was." I'm like, "What?" And so he made a special point of not making sure that the guitar was ready in time for that tour. And it arrived like literally the night before. And I played on it maybe, I'm not even exaggerating, maybe for 4 hours straight. And I was like, and as I was playing, I was like, I think this is it for me. I don't understand how it could get any better than this. Like it was like whatever, King Arthur with the sword or something along those lines. I was like, this is it. Like honestly, when I came back from that Thunder Snow and that mini tour, I sold like 2 of my guitars because I'm like, I have a thing. It's a me thing, but if it ain't getting played, it can't stay.
Fair.
And it's harsh but fair.
Yeah.
But to this day, that EGC Custom Jagmaster is it is my ultimate guitar, and it's the perfect guitar for me. And it's I can't believe how lucky I am every time I be able to pick it up to be able to do stuff with it. And it's the best.
Yeah. Is there an instrument that you've lost, either because it was stolen or because you had to pawn it or because you accidentally left it somewhere that you desperately wish you could have back?
So normally I would answer that Jag-Stang that got stolen on tour. That was like my Replicator guitar for like the first third of that band that Bill the Grill replaced. But since we already mentioned that, I'm going to take this another way and say that I used to play a Fender Quad.
A what?
In Replicator, a Fender Quad, a quad reverb. So think of it.
Okay.
The twin reverb, but like on steroids. There's like 2 more speakers. It's like built like a fridge and about twice as heavy.
Yeah.
And I would think about that literally every time that we would play a venue with stairs, because I'd be humping it up the stairs. Sitting there complaining the entire way. And I loved it though. It was an amazing amp. It defined the sound of that band for sure. But I loved it. It was almost constitutionally incapable of being quiet. But amazing amp. I sold it to Jeff from the Meishi for a while.
Mm-hmm.
For about a year, and then about a year later, I was like, "Oh, I missed that amp." And I was like, "Hey, do you still have that Fender Quad?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I built my own amp and I'm using that now. Like, I'll sell it back to you if you want." So I bought it back from Jeff.
Yeah. And
then Patrick, I kid you not, the first show we played was a place with stairs, and I was like, "Oh, right, right."
Yeah.
I'm an idiot, and I was sitting there helping my freaking fridge of an amp up the stairs. I alluded to earlier, we didn't mention exactly how Mount Vicious ended or anything, and we don't need to, but I was not in a good spot psychically, and I was not in a good spot financially. And part of that was tough decisions were made, and I sold the quad. And actually, you know what? That's incorrect. I did not sell it. I pawned it. And I don't think I've ever said that aloud, because I feel a heavy shame on that was like the Replicator amp. You know what I mean? And it was indicative of,
man, there's no money in pawning your shit either. It's like,
no, I know, but exactly. But that's the thing, is the lie that I was telling myself was, oh, I'll come back and get this. I'm like, really, motherfucker? Is that really going to happen? And I didn't. And I have no idea where it went. And it's that bums me out to this day. And it's the symbolism almost. Because for not that anyone would necessarily do this, but if you're going to tell the story of my life, that would be like the middle break, right?
Yeah,
it was like, well, whereas most of the behind the music is like, well, then he went into rehab and blah blah blah. Yeah, I got nothing like that. But I'm like, yep, he pawned the Replicator amp, and was still in deep denial to himself about his ability to be able to get it back. Like, I could have gotten twice the money for it if I just sold it. If I'd only had the courage to admit to myself that stuff was not going to get better for a really long time. So, double heaping helpings of shame and requisite Fender Quad.
Yeah. If you could be a guest with any artist and do one song, what would the song be and who would the artist be?
Man, this is I so, as much as I love hearing how people answer this question, this is the one I was like, oh, fuck. And one of the reasons why, and I was thinking about this morning, actually, one of the reasons why is most of my favorite bands have very idiosyncratic players. And that's small bands and big bands, right? Like, I mean, like I'm a huge AC/DC fan. Like Malcolm Young is one of my favorite guitar players of all time. So the temptation is to say like, oh, I'll AC/DC of Malcolm Young. And yeah, but I almost feel like, oh God, that just doesn't feel right. Like it's even the fact that like Stevie, his nephew or his son, I can't remember, is playing now. I'm like, really? It's almost like the one guy in AC/DC you can't have be different. So where I'm getting at with this is when I think of like my playing, my very idiosyncratic, self-taught style of playing, when I think of guitars I really like, some of them are very idiosyncratic as well. And it's like if you remove them from that band or that outfit, it changes what that is. And then when I think of myself as a singer, I'm either a bad singer that sings well or a good singer that sings poorly, one or the other. And I just don't feel like it would be something that I would be able to. I would probably do okay, right? But like for something where like, oh, this is your rock and roll dream moment. Yeah, man, I don't think I'm a good enough vocalist. So, thought about this a lot. And what I came up with was fucking Devo.
Oh, no shit.
And specifically Girl You Want. Because Devo is one of my favorite bands of all time. And I've had this discussion with Tony Ash. I feel like Devo is a secret guitar band and people don't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
But man, I tell you what, like there's a lot of Devo in a lot of the bands that I've done. And with the exception of the more, crazy like lead stuff, which I could probably do if I put the work into it, I would rip the shit out of some Devo, man. And that's something where, yeah, I could see that. I don't foresee any situation of that happening at all, ever.
Man, we almost lost Mark Mothersbaugh to COVID.
I know, dude. That's so impossibly heavy. I mean, like it's like, dude, that's Mark Mothersbaugh. He's like he's like a deity in weirdo rock,
Yeah.
I mean, to this day, one of the great accomplishments for me in Proton Controversial is having Jerry Casale on, not once but twice. He invited himself back on because he had a good time. Are you kidding me? Is this reality? Yeah. Holy crap! Like when I think MySpace had like, put your religion in your politics. I said my politics are Fugazi and my religion is Devo.
Yeah.
And but when I think about like, because you want to do something like you want to set yourself up for success, right? You want to be in this imaginary position. You want to be like position where people are like, man, they killed it. They came in and did that, and that was awesome. Instead of being like, yeah, that was the thing. I hope they had fun up there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I could rip the shit out of some Devo.
Yeah, man. I love that band. All right, last question. If you can imagine a taxi that can go anywhere, and you climb into this taxi and you say to the taxi driver, hey, man, take me home. Where's home?
So I alluded to earlier, when I was younger, we moved around a lot. And again, not because the name was a military family, which is, the privileged thing. But, I moved 14 times before I was the age of 17. And I counted it up. 30 times I've moved. One of them cross country. And I think because of how we were constantly bouncing around, whether it was with me and my mom and dad, just me and my dad, me moving with my grandma, whatever. The idea of home is a tricky concept for me. Like when people have this idea of, hey, I'm going home for the holidays. that's always kind of an itchy statement for me, specifically. I can appreciate what people get out of it, but I don't get the same thing. And where I'm going with this is I've thought a lot about that, because we made a lot of effort into making Milwaukee home. But by the same token, Oakland, 22 years of my life, all of my adulthood. I have the deepest love for all things Bay Area and Oakland specifically, which is just the, never treated well, never given its due course. I have a begrudging respect for Modesto, as much as I don't ever want to be there. But when I think about the idea of this taxi, this taxi where you say, take me home, I think the taxi driver would say you're already there.
Yeah.
Because wherever it's a fine song, but I penned a line at one point that wherever I lay my head is home. Actually, I think that's a Metallica lyric. I may misremember. It was something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
Where I am is home.
Yeah.
So the turnaround of that to not be depressing as fuck, right? Is to say that.
Yeah. I think Metallica took that from Papa Was a Rolling Stone, though.
You're right. You're totally. Yeah. You know what? Damn it. You're totally correct. That's a far superior song. But yeah, man, it's kind of true, and I think it's one of the reasons why touring is. I don't want to say easy. Touring's never easy, but I take to it so well.
Yeah.
And that's difficult for some folks to understand, and I get it, and I know that my lived experience is very different from others' lived experience. Mm-hmm. But yeah, man, wherever I lay my head is home.
Yeah.
So he'd say I'm already there, and then I would say, "Do I have to pay you for this ride? Should I tip?"
Yeah. Well, I guess did he put your quadriverb in the trunk?
Yeah, exactly. Are there stairs at this place?
Yeah. Man, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time to do it.
Dude, this has been super fucking cool. And when we made this record and it being about what it's about and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that was something where I was like, man, this is kind of operating, hopefully, I don't know yet, in the same sort of mindset as Crash and Ride. And it's such a good show. And I know I've said like 17 times, but I'll say it 17 more.
Man, thank you.
Yeah, and I don't get the opportunity to talk about this kind of stuff very often. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that.
Man, I feel like if we can just get people used to saying what's really going on with them, people won't be walking around with this like bucket of sadness in their chest all the time.
Yeah, I mean, everything's a little smaller when it's out.
Yeah. Man.
So, yeah, man.
I really appreciate it.
You too, brother. Appreciate it.
Take care, Conan. I'll speak to you soon.
Take care.
Bye. All right, that's the rest of my interview with Conan Neutron. That guy never sits still. I can't imagine what this quarantine thing is like for him to not be able to go out and play shows. It's got to be driving him crazy. It's driving me crazy. It's probably driving you crazy. I don't know how anybody's holding up. I really sincerely hope that you are hanging in there. I want to thank Jake Kreger. He's the de facto producer of the show. He sends me notes after every episode to help me figure out ways to make it better, so I'm really deeply in his debt. He also created and maintains the YouTube channel. If at any point, for any reason, you can't find an episode on your favorite podcast aggregator, just do a web search for YouTube Crash and Ride Podcast. Those two search variables should take you right to our channel. Thanks, Jake. Man, you're gold. Thank you so much. I want to thank Gene Wolfolk and the band The Powder Room. They provided all the music that you heard on today's episode, the intro, the bumper, the outro, the music under my voice right now. That's all The Powder Room. You can hear more of their music and download their records at thepowderroom.bandcamp.com. Throw them a few bucks. They deserve it. They're a great band. They're on hiatus right now, but Gene has a new project. He and Erica Stroud from the band Motherfucker have a new band called Dream Tent, and it is absolutely a huge departure from the noise rock of Motherfucker in the Powder Room. It is dreamy. It's synthy. It's kind of shoegazy. It's just gorgeous. They have a new full-length record coming out soon. You can hear it at dreamtent.bandcamp.com. That's DREAMTENT.bandcamp.com. If you need to contact the show for any reason, you can email me at crashandride@protonmail.com. crashandride@protonmail.com. That email is encrypted. It's private. Nobody reads it but me. I will never violate your anonymity on the air without your express permission. That's crashandride@protonmail.com. So the last few weeks, we've picked up a whole lot of new listeners, and some of them have become Patreon subscribers. If you'd like to throw a small $5 or $10 donation towards the podcast every month to help us keep going, you can go to patreon.com/crashandride and commit to a small $5 or $10 monthly gift. And that'll keep me and my family in grits and groceries for the next few months, because it's getting pretty lean around here. But overall, we're fine. Don't worry about us. Everything's going to be great. I cannot wait to get out on the road again and play music for you kind people and see your beautiful faces and go get coffee before shows and go to diners after shows. I miss all of that so much. I hope that you are doing okay. I am almost half a century old, and nothing in my lifetime has prepared me for 2020. It is the strangest timeline ever. But until we speak again, take care of yourself. Be kind to yourself. Ask for help if you need it. Find some way to soak up some live music if you can do it safely. Support your favorite band. And remember, loud guitars save lives.